Spooky season is officially here, and that can only mean one thing. All October long, we're gonna check out some of the greatest Halloween episodes, specials, and spooky episodes in general. Right out the gate, I wanted to start with an episode that a bunch of people were requesting. Recently, I've started digging back into some more Cartoon Network shows since a good solid 80% of my videos are about Nickelodeon. To be specific, I've really been enjoying going back and watching the Powerpuff Girls for some reason. I forgot how much I used to love this show when I was super little. It's genuinely a fantastic show through and through, but looking back on it, I've realized just how morbid this show got at times. It had a really clever way of tackling serious topics in a very low-key way at certain times, and then at other times it was super in your face about how messed up the contents of the episode were. Like, some episodes would allude to specific situations that were definitely above the heads of the show's predominantly child audience, usually in a way that wouldn't shock the viewers, but if their parents were watching, it would definitely make them think. Meanwhile, other episodes would directly portray whatever morbid thing they chose. We're talking shootings, murders, and even corpses. Seriously, the Powerpuff Girls had an intense dark side to it that was sometimes directly in plain sight without so much as a second thought. And of course today we're going to be checking out one of those right-in-your-face episodes. That's why today, on our nostalgic walk down memory lane, we're going to be checking out an episode that a ton of you were requesting in my last Powerpuff Girls video, Abracadaver. In the beginning of this episode, we hear the narrator introduce the city of Townsville as a place of wonder and magic as we pan right on over to the old Townsville Magic Theater where the Powerpuff Girls are standing outside talking to the mayor and Miss Bellum. The mayor starts telling them about how the Magic Theater is the most historic site in all of Townsville. The mayor jumps up and hugs the building and starts weirdly kissing on it as he talks about how he used to see magic shows here when he was a kid. He spies a poster on the wall for the final performance of Al-Lusion, who the mayor deems as the greatest magician of all time.
I ought to know. I was there. That night, he performed the most incredible feats ever seen. It was a spectacular show. Then he asked for an assistant from the audience. I raised my hand, but he chose another. He chose a little girl. A charming creature as sweet as any of you Powerpuff Girls.
Al brings the little girl on stage and he takes her stuffed bear from her. He then proceeds to make it vanish before her very eyes before he quickly steps aside to take a bow.
Heartbroken without her bear, she revealed him to be nothing more than a sham. Oh, we all laughed at the big phony. But our laughter quickly turned to tears as the magic was silenced forever.
The mayor and the girls take a moment of silence that feels just a tiny bit too long for a children's cartoon. Then the mayor quickly shouts to let the festivities begin as this happens.
Yes!
We then cut right on over to the Powerpuff Girls who are on their couch screaming as they watch a really gnarly looking zombie movie. They hear the sound of glass breaking and they quickly hide under their couch, wondering where the sound came from.
I think it was a zombie! Cut it out, Bubbles. There's no such thing as zombies.
A zombie! Oh no! It's Al-Lusion! He's returned from beyond the grave as Abracadaver, the magical zombie!
You laughed at me, but now revenge!
The evil mystical zombie causes all sorts of havoc. He turns a school bus full of kids into an insane-looking zombie rabbit. He turns a giant building into a bird cage with a giant bird inside of it. And he turns people into trees, and just all sorts of magical chaos.
That's peculiar. Miss Bellum, do you see this saw I see?
Yes, but can't you see that all of Townsville is under attack?
I think my hat's under attack. Call the haberdasher. Oh, and the Powerpuff Girls.
As the Powerpuff Girls continue to watch their scary zombie movie, they're startled by the sound of their phone ringing. They all hide in fear before Blossom works up the courage to slowly approach the phone.
Hello?
Blossom, you girls have to help at once.
Why? What is it, Mayor?
My favorite hat's been ruined, and, Townsville's under attack by an evil, demented zombie magician.
What? An evil, demented zombie? Ah! No way, I'm not going. Me neither. I know it's scary, but we have to.
We see the Powerpuff Girls fly off into the night, terrified and constantly looking over their shoulders. They finally come upon Abracadaver, who's levitating some buildings in an effort to terrify the city of Townsville. Buttercup and Bubbles hang behind as they tell Blossom to go up to him.
Excuse me, Mr. Zombie, sir.
Eh?
Could you stop destroying Townsville with your evil zombie magic, please?
You that girl with bear.
Huh?
You ruined illusion. You make them laugh at me. But now, revenge!
Abracadaver proceeds to hypnotize Blossom using a pocket watch. She sits there under his command as her eyes quickly turn into swirls.
You put her down! Sorry to break up the act. Buttercup, look! Huh? It won't stop!
After reconstructing himself, he uses his magic on Buttercup to start cutting her in half. Meanwhile, he traps Bubbles in a bag and locks her in a case full of water. Then, he menacingly approaches Blossom for his grand finale.
Now you meet your doom.
Abracadaver continues to yo-yo Blossom back and forth with the rope of handkerchiefs until finally he encapsulates her into the Iron Maiden in front of all the townspeople to see.
Now Townsville is at the mercy of that evil magician Abraca!
Ta-da!
Blossom?
Blossom flies right on over to Buttercup and releases her from her box, as they both find Bubbles in the other box afterwards. The mayor asks how they did it, to which they both say,
It's magic, silly!
How? Who? When? But who's in the... Oh, girls, I love that voodoo that you do. So once again, the day is saved, thanks to the Powerpuff Girls.
Wow, color me impressed. How did they do that? It was truly a mind-blowing magic trick. I have personally analyzed this episode up and down. I've had a team of scientists and analysts at Dust Tilshon Enterprises comb through this episode with a fine-tooth comb, and we've all come up empty-handed on an explanation on how they did this. The Powerpuff Girls are truly just an astonishing trio of superheroes. They out-magicked Al-Lusion himself, the world's greatest magician. That plot twist at the end definitely was a giant surprise, but I'm not mad at it at all. I've got to take a sec to talk about the gruesome gore factor in this episode. First of all, the zombie movie that the Powerpuff Girls were watching was just wicked. Those zombies looked just disgusting. They were so rotted and decaying that it was turning my stomach. It's interesting to me because I've found that a lot of cartoons similar to this have a hard time drawing genuinely scary looking zombies. Like, for example, Scooby Doo on Zombie Island. Now, that movie did a great job with how they drew the zombies, especially Morgan Moonscar. However, with that being said, the art style of that movie was a lot different in comparison to any other version of Scooby Doo that we had seen up to that point. It felt a lot more serious, and the movie itself had a darker tone. On that note, if you want to hear me talk more about that movie and another fantastic Scooby Doo movie in one video, I'll link it down in the description box below for you to check out after this one if you wanna. But my point is, of course Scooby Doo on Zombie Island had scary looking zombies. It was drawn with a lot more detail and with a lot more realistic approach. The intention behind it was to be kind of a serious take on Scooby Doo, more or less. Meanwhile, a show like the Powerpuff Girls, which admittedly has a lot more of a simplistic art style and a whimsical approach at that, you would think that they would definitely have a harder time animating a scary zombie, but they did it very well in my opinion. If you look at the zombies in this movie that they were watching, they're just gruesome and decrepit looking. Then, of course, Abracadabra himself is just insane. They did such a good job of making him look menacing and terrifying. This guy died decades ago and has been decaying in that spiked tomb ever since, and now his reanimated remains are haunting the town. The look of him gave me nightmares when I was a kid. I always dreaded this episode every time it came on because I knew that it would give me nightmares, and of course I could have changed the channel, but I wouldn't. I just couldn't look away. I was captivated in fear, and I just had to see what was going to come next. Of course, this was the same case for Blossom partway into this episode. That sequence just added a whole new level of fear for me as Abracadabra himself goes. Blossom was being hypnotized by Abracadabra, and she could have stopped and looked away as he waved the pocket watch in front of her face, but instead she was just frozen in fear and she stared directly at him with no hope of breaking his spell. It honestly was just chilling. Let's be honest, Blossom is really resilient. She, of all the Powerpuff Girls, is the one that I would expect to be able to break Abracadabra's spell. She, of all the Powerpuff Girls, is the one that I would bet money on being able to fight Abracadabra's spell. However, he's so strong that she didn't even stand a chance. This aspect added a sense of hopelessness for me. The realization that Blossom couldn't even look away from him really made me worry for her safety, especially considering Buttercup and Bubbles basically tossed her into the lion's den. I do have a sense of empathy for Abracadabra. What happened to him was really grim and sad. He didn't deserve that. He was just a stage magician. Of course he wasn't doing real magic because his gig was parlor tricks more or less. But if we zoom in a bit and look further at what happened, it can be gathered that ridicule led to all of this. The mayor tells the Powerpuff Girls the story of Al-Lusion, and when he gets to the part about the little girl accidentally pantsing him, he says that they all laughed at the big phony. He even laughs about it to this day as he ridicules the dead magician, essentially dancing on his grave in front of the theater. The mayor really seemed to make light of what happened to Al, and it's pretty disgusting. The ridicule and humiliation is what led to Al making a mistake and embarrassment and would ultimately cost him his life. In a way, the mayor partially shoulders part of the blame for Al dying, and it's pretty morbid that he makes light of it and laughs about basically killing one of his favorite magicians. In all reality though, I kind of can't blame Al for coming back for vengeance in the afterlife. He has every right to be upset. I know what happened with the little girl wasn't exactly her fault, as she kind of tripped and pantsed him by mistake from what I could gather. However, all the people in the crowd didn't have to laugh at him and call him a phony. It was just kind of over the top and cruel. On top of that, his death was just extremely gruesome. The trap that he fell into is called an Iron Maiden, and interestingly enough, the trap itself has a reputation as an allegedly popular medieval torture device. However, there's no actual legit evidence of this kind of device actually existing before the 19th century. Now, seeing him fall into it and being gruesomely crushed was just terrifying. I'm still kind of shocked that they showed that on screen. Further than that though, I'm even more shocked that they showed Blossom getting crushed in it as well. Sure, technically it wasn't really Blossom and it was Abracadaver, however, we as viewers didn't know that yet. All we see is Blossom being thrown into it and crushed by the Iron Maiden. That honestly was really morbid. The fact that they showed this child being crushed into that thing and killed was just really dark, and again, still kinda shocked that they showed that on screen. Moving on from there though, I do love the mystical aspect of this episode, specifically speaking, the way that they brought Abracadaver back to life. The mayor had ordered that the building that would be his final resting place be torn down, which disturbed the Iron Maiden that he was encapsulated in, which plays into the common folklore of disturbed remains coming back to life seeking revenge. Abracadaver as a villain though, took a really interesting approach to his terrifying the city of Townsville. Now, don't get me wrong, the magic that he was doing was scary, but a lot of it was just really weird. For example, when he turned that giant building into a birdcage, or when he turned that group of people into trees for some reason. Like, I get that his end goal is to scare these people, but the means of which he did it was rather hit or miss in my opinion. I will say though, the giant saws that were sawing through the buildings were a pretty terrifying touch. Like, imagine being at work and just sitting at your desk and all of a sudden you're sliced in half like the guy on the cover of Partied in Half by the band Party Cannon. Great album, by the way. Or like how those little kids were just riding on the school bus and all of a sudden it turned into a giant rabid bunny rabbit. Just imagine that. You're a child riding on the bus, the same school bus route that you take every single day, and then all of a sudden the school bus turns into a giant rabbit and you're sitting on top of it just freaking out. It just honestly sounds terrifying to me. I will say though, I got a really good chuckle at the part where Buttercup hits Abracadaver and he goes flying towards the wall and we just see him crumble to the ground in a bunch of pieces. I nearly died laughing. That was just hilarious to me. Something about seeing that terrifying zombie just crumble had me in tears. All in all though, I will say that this episode was great. There was one huge stone that I feel like was left unturned, and that would be, who was the little girl that Abracadaver brought on stage? The episode implied that she was just a throwaway side character, which is just fine, I can accept that, but I feel like it was kind of a missed opportunity for them to kind of tie this episode together nicely. I'm not exactly sure how they could have done it though. Maybe like she could have come back as an old woman and tried to stop Abracadaver from hurting Blossom or something along those lines. Regardless though, they still managed to wrap this episode up rather nicely. In the end, I found it funny that the explanation was just magic. There's literally no real logical way to explain how they did it other than legitimate magic. This right there is just a lesson to never underestimate the Powerpuff Girls. You never know what they could possibly be capable of. But what do you think? Did you enjoy this episode as a kid? Did it terrify you? Let me know in the comments down below. I always love seeing your guys' feedback. Of course, you know I gotta share some love for my patrons, especially those of you in the 90s kids tier. If you want to get a shout out at the end of the video just like these awesome folks do, then be sure to check out my Patreon, where for as little as 14 cents per day you can support me chasing my dreams and get some cool behind the scenes content along the way. Right now I'm planning a really gnarly video to drop on there that I'm kind of nervous about because it's a pretty offensive episode of a really funny show, but it's gonna be hilarious and you're not gonna want to miss it, so be sure you check out my Patreon if that sounds like something you might be interested in. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a comment and drop a like and maybe give a little bit of praise to the YouTube algorithm in hopes that it pushes this video to everyone else, and as always, thank you so much for watching and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.